What's the scariest thing you've ever seen that you still can't explain? Before I tell you what happened that day, I need you to hold one image in your head for a second: an old apartment, quiet in that almost too still way, and one of those vintage push-button corded phones, pure 80s, always sitting in the exact same spot, like it belonged to the furniture. The kind of object you don't even notice until it starts showing up where it shouldn't. When I was a kid, my parents worked early, so they'd drop me off at my grandmother's place for breakfast and I'd go to school from there. That routine lasted years. Then, in my senior year of high school, my grandmother passed away. Suddenly the safe pattern disappeared, and I started going straight home after school instead. Not long after that, my mom began complaining about something small, almost stupid, which is probably why it stuck with her. When she got home from work, the phone receiver on the nightstand next to her bed wouldn't be on the base. Not just slightly crooked. Off. Sometimes hanging, sometimes resting weirdly, sometimes near the floor. And she'd say the same thing every time: it was seated properly when I left. You must have used it. But I hadn't. And I understood why she assumed I did. It was the most logical answer. I came home, answered or made a call, and carelessly left the receiver off the cradle. Except it kept happening in a way that didn't feel careless. It felt deliberate. Like someone was leaving it in a specific position so it would be noticed later, just a tiny detail but unmistakable. Then came the day I got home early. And I have to explain the layout, because it's what makes the memory feel so wrong. When you opened the front door, you could see straight through the living room and dining area, the kitchen doorway, and a short hallway that led to only 2 bedrooms, my parents' room and mine. There wasn't another door. The windows were narrow, old sash windows with screens, the kind you have to lift with effort, the kind that makes noise if you so much as touch it. And we lived on the 3rd floor. In other words, nobody was slipping in and out without being seen or heard. I walked in, and immediately, I heard 2 footsteps inside my parents' bedroom. 2 steps. Not the building settling. Not wood creaking randomly. Not a pipe. It was the sound of someone walking. Clear enough that I knew exactly where it came from, and quick enough to trigger that instant certainty: someone is home. I dropped my backpack in the living room and, stupidly, ran down the hall. It wasn't far. Just a few seconds. I hit the doorway fully expecting to catch someone moving, someone shutting a closet, anything. There was no one. The room looked exactly the way it always did. The bed, slightly imperfect the way my mom left it. The closet closed. The curtains still. Nothing out of place, except for one thing. The phone. The receiver that normally sat on the base on my mom's nightstand was on the floor. And it wasn't just known object fell, end of story. It was positioned in a way that looked almost arranged. The cord was stretched to its absolute limit, like someone had pulled it carefully to the very end and let go right there. No tangling. No awkward bounce. No half fall onto the nightstand. Just the receiver on the floor, cable drawn taut. In the moment, I felt this awful blend of confusion and certainty: this doesn't make sense, and it's not an accident. I picked it up, but before I put it back I stood there staring, trying to picture how it could have happened without someone touching it. Later, on a different day, when fear had cooled into obsession, I tried to recreate it. I shook the nightstand. I nudged the base. I tilted it. I pulled and released the cord in different ways. I couldn't do it. If I forced the receiver off with my finger, it would fall onto the nightstand or beside it. If it slipped, it landed weirdly. But that exact position, the receiver on the floor with the cord stretched to maximum, only happened if I pulled the cord out carefully, placed the receiver exactly where I'd found it, and held it there for a moment like it needed time to settle. It didn't feel like physics. It felt like intention. And then came the part that still makes my stomach drop. The second I set the receiver back onto the base, the phone rang. Instantly. Like it had been waiting. Like the line had been stuck until the receiver returned to where it belonged. I answered. It was my dad. And the first thing he said was, "What's wrong? Are you okay?" I asked him why he was asking that. And he told me he'd called, apparently just a little before I got home, and someone answered. He thought it was me. But nobody said anything. He kept saying hello, listening to dead silence. A silence that didn't feel like a missed connection, more like someone was there, just refusing to speak. Eventually he hung up. Then he tried to call again, immediately, and he couldn't get through. He said he only managed to reach the house after I hung up. So, according to him, the first call was answered by someone who didn't speak. And when I look back on it now, my brain still tries to build a normal explanation out of normal pieces. But the pieces don't cooperate. I heard footsteps in a bedroom while I was still at the front door. I ran straight down the hall, and no one passed me. There was nowhere to hide. My parents kept so much stuff under the bed and in the closet that no adult-sized person could have fit without knocking half of it over. The windows hadn't been touched. And the receiver wasn't just off the base. It was placed in a way I could only replicate by doing it carefully on purpose. And the strangest part is, after that, it stopped. My mom never again came home to find the receiver out of place. Not once. Like whatever it was only needed one moment. One last little stunt. One final push. Or maybe, if I'm being honest, the last time it ever wanted to be noticed. And I know how that sounds. I do. But there's a difference between a scary story and a memory that refuses to close. This one never closed for me. First comment: did you ever try having someone call the phone and then not answer? The ringing could have shaken it enough to dislodge the receiver. The footsteps might have been the sound of the phone hitting the floor. User replied, that's an interesting idea, and no, we never tested that specifically, at least not that I remember. But we definitely had calls go unanswered, someone in the front room, in the bathroom, etc., and it never happened in those situations. And that's what gets me. If it were just vibration, I'd expect the receiver to shift, maybe sit crooked, maybe slide, maybe fall in a sloppy way. But it didn't look sloppy. It looked placed. That day it was on the floor with the cord stretched to the absolute limit, like someone pulled it out with care and let it settle there. And the footsteps weren't a single thud or a scrape, they were two distinct steps coming from inside the bedroom, not from the nightstand area. That's why the mechanical explanation never fully fits, even though I wish it did. Comment 2, hey, if both of your parents were out working at that time for over a decade, and you usually didn't get home until later, why was your dad calling your house? User replied, he wasn't great at remembering my schedule and his workload was unpredictable, so he'd call whenever he had time and thought I might be home. Also, if I remember right, it's been more than 30 years, I was only about half an hour early. That actually tracks perfectly for him. He was the kind of person who lived by, if I get a break, I'll do it now, without stopping to check whether the timing made sense. But the half-hour early part is what makes everything feel worse. Half an hour is just enough to turn a routine into a blind spot, enough for him to call thinking I might be walking in, enough for someone to answer and stay silent, enough for me to step into that apartment and hear footsteps where nobody could possibly be. And the part that still bothers me isn't even who could have been there. It's that for a few minutes, my home behaved like there was someone inside it, walking, pulling the receiver, answering a call, and then the whole thing vanished like it had never existed at all.